voire d'établir un Saint-Zénon, qui est, je crois, si je ne m'abuse, enterré à Vérone, ni Santa Monica, et Leonardo Fibonacci. Leonardo Fibonacci, qui a vécu à Bougie, dont le père était consul à l'époque, mais c'était beaucoup plus un grand marchand très riche, et il y avait une université. Et cette université de Bougie avait comme professeur Leonardo Fibonacci, qui a ramené en Italie les chiffres arabes et le fameux logarithme qu'on appelle la suite de Fibonacci, qui est un logarithme. Et il était déjà enseignant à l'université. Ceci m'amène à penser à autre chose. Maintenant, nous avons des visas. Et le grand problème qui se pose, pas pour ceux qui obtiennent facilement les visas, pour ceux qui ne les obtiennent pas, la migration. La migration reste un des grands problèmes. En Europe, je crois qu'il est surdéveloppé comme problème, il a été peut-être même surexagéré, parce que qu'est-ce que c'est que 100 000 migrants? Ça me paraît très peu. Dans toute l'Afrique, il y a environ 35 millions de personnes qui sont déplacés, qui sont réfugiés, qui sont migrants, et ils sont accueillis dans beaucoup de pays africains. Je citerai entre autres le Kenya qui partage, et pardonnez-moi l'expression, mais je dirais même, il partage la pauvreté avec les plus pauvres. Il accueille beaucoup de migrants. Il y a d'autres pays qui accueillent les migrants, les pays de l'Afrique du Nord. Nous accueillons beaucoup de gens du Sahel, ou du plus loin que du Sahel, même de la partie anglophone de l'Afrique de l'Ouest. Donc, cette question de migration peut se résoudre. Ça n'est pas un problème énorme et insurmontable. Et il peut se faire dans une bonne coopération qui respecte la dignité des Africains, de toutes les populations africaines, dans un respect aussi du pays d'accueil, dans le cadre d'échanges qui serait un peu plus humain peut-être, et avec beaucoup d'intérêt. Il ne faut pas oublier la partie économique, la partie humaine, la formation, le développement, qui serait un développement gagnant-gagnant des deux côtés. Maintenant, j'ai parlé un peu de la prévention des conflits. Nous avons les systèmes que j'ai déjà signalés, le système d'alerte précoce, la médiation, la négociation, les missions de paix. L'Afrique contribue aussi avec l'Union, avec l'ONU, avec l'OTAN, dans les missions de paix. Et dans ces opérations de maintien de la paix, qu'il y en a 15 au total dans le monde, 8 sont en Afrique. Ce qui vous donne une idée de l'importance des conflits qui existent en Afrique. Les conflits qui sont parfois des guerres civiles, endogènes, mais aussi avec des interventions exogènes, extérieures, qui n'ont pas toujours été ni du meilleur bon sens, ni des plus fructueuses. On en a vu et d'où l'augmentation. Voilà, je crois qu'en quelques mots, j'ai donné quelques pistes et je suis sûre que les experts qui vont prendre la parole après moi sauront le faire mieux que moi. Merci, monsieur l'ambassadeur.
Merci beaucoup. Fida, merci beaucoup pour votre intervention. Vous avez donné un peu un input pour le reste de la conférence, je crois. I forgot to tell you at the beginning that, in fact, we have interpretation. So the two working languages today are English and French. And so, you know, there is equipment there. If you don't be shy, you know, if you want to take it, it's free. And now we start with the first panel, which will be chaired by Monsieur Juillet, qui vient d'arriver à Rome, je crois. We have, you know, everything looks very nice, you know, when you come to a conference and you see the speakers and everybody in the public. You don't know what is behind that, and there were some logistical difficulties. I think we have to be clear on that. There is a strike in Fiumicino today, and a few of our speakers had to come by train and plane, and I thank them very much. It's very kind of you to have, how can I say, come to the challenge for being with us in Rome. So the first panel will be chaired by Monsieur Juillet, who is in front of me, Existing Threat versus Regional and International Initiatives. Thank you for your attention.
puliti, questo qui l'ho pulito, l'ho portato adesso.
Où sont les autres? J'espère que je ne suis pas tout seul. Monsieur Nyambura. Monsieur Benyaya, Monsieur Nyambura et Monsieur Kruger. Mr. Kruger, Mr. Nyambura, and Mr. Yaya. Thank you. You're invited. Pardon, excusez-moi.
Pas de problème. Enchantée.
Français?
Oui, oui, je vais m'exprimer en français. Par contre, je vais prendre mon ordinateur.
Okay. I've been unable to speak with you before because I just arrived now from the train, you know, with 1 hour late.
That's okay. Also, when you arrived this morning.
And sorry that I've been unable to speak with you before. I just arrived now. And, my plane was late, everything was awful. So I start just, you know, to make a short introduction, and after we start with you, if you want.
Yes, sure.
After we follow on with you.
Sure.
And after with the lady. The lady is ending, okay? Vous terminez là, d'accord? Hein? Parfait. Well, so good afternoon. So our panel has well, as goal to speak about the existing threats versus regional and international initiatives. So for during this this session, we will hear 3 speakers. And after, obviously, we will discuss with you. That is to say, we will make answer, you know, and questions in order to enlarge and to enforce what we will say now. Okay. But for the beginning, just to start, I have to say that first of all, I'm very happy because I think that we have 3 speakers who are really covering different matters. And on our topic, on our goal, it is clear that there are a lot of influences, there are a lot of issues, and some issues are special on one area or another. Therefore, it is important to understand and to keep in mind that in this discussion, each one will bring his own experience, his own view, from his culture, from his origin, and so it will be interesting to exchange. But for you to cross what has been said, you know, taking on each of them what appears for you interesting, or a plus, you know. Well, on my side, just to start, I want to say that I think there's a story. Really, I've started in this area, that is to say, in the Saharan area, which is like a river with 2 banks, you know. There's North African bank and the Sub-Saharan bank. And in the middle, since a long time, you know, for thousands of years, this part has been moving all the time, because the people living inside was in a very poor area, as it has been said before, a very, very poor area, and they were trying to survive, you know, fighting one against the other, going south or north to take people, to take cattle, and so on. So it was a strange thing. And in this area, now, there are still
a very little part of financing. Everything is made through material exchange. Or the main part of the economic activity is made like that. And therefore, it is very interesting to judge and to understand what happens in this area with our own views. It is important to understand and to see how they react with their own views, okay? About what happens in this area. 20 years ago, the main, I will say, the main activities, illicit activities, because always they have suffered illicit activities in this area, from Atlantic Sea to Red Sea. In all this area, they were using illicit trade as a way of life. But 20 years ago, it was mainly cigarettes, you know, and we saw an increase, a growth of drugs. We see an increase and growth of weapons, and we saw after a very important growth of the migrants, that is to say, all the human beings. The interesting point is that when you check it, you see that all these traffics, all this illicit trade has been made through the same roads, has been made through the same kind of people, or the same group of people. And therefore, that's the reason for which there is a link and a mix between everything. I say always when I speak about this area, I remember, you know, one of the, I would say, we cannot say best, one of the main terrorists of the area, which is called Mr. Marlborough, because he started with, you know him very well, all of us, we know him. He started selling, trading cigarettes, illicit trade on cigarettes. He moved to the weapons, and he moved to be terrorist. And now he's one of the chief of the terrorists. And, well, he has made a lot of operation. For if you know a little bit about what happens, for instance, he has been the leading guy for the El Amenas operation, as you say, an attack of an oil area in Algeria. And he is now, as resting, we can say, he rests in the south of Libya. Because it's more and more difficult for him to be in other places because everybody is looking for him, obviously. So I say that because, as it has been said before, you must understand, and we'll see it through our speakers, that it is necessary to include a lot of different views. The local fights, coming from, you know, hundreds of years, hundreds of centuries. The external financing, because we don't have to forget that in this area, they suffered, and they suffer also, always and all the time. They suffer financial support from other countries. To give you an example, and it's very clear, in the northeast of Mali, for instance, when the Chadian troops and the French troop came on Gao to the center east of Mali, some planes from Qatar, I have to say that, have been obliged to take off immediately. And they were there to promote their views to the people of the area, to the Tuareg of the area. So external financing. And it's very, and when you are in a very poor country, when you finance something, it's very good. You have good looking for everybody. But it's not alone. A lot of groups now, and terrorist groups, are moving from one place to another. Don't forget that in the desert, in Sahara, from Mauritania to Sudan, roughly you can do in one night 700 kilometers in one night. So you can move yourself, you can move your group very, very quickly, very easily. And so it's very difficult to control it. And I don't speak only on terrorism, I speak about on illicit trade also, on all the illicit trade, you know? So another issue, and maybe it will be one of the points, I don't know what we'll say, what our expert will say, but I'm sure that at one moment or other we'll have to say some words on the fact that some groups, some mafias, because that's criminal groups, you know, some criminal groups now are using some part of countries from Atlantic Sea to Red Sea as a camp, as a base, you know. And because in this area, there is not enough police, not enough army to be able to control them. And so that's free zone. We can say that's really free zone, but free of flow zone. I don't speak free trade. I say free of flow zone. And that will be in the future, I'm convinced about it, one of the great problems for all the countries we speak now. And they need our help. When I say our help, the help of everybody. It is clear that in front of this situation, it is necessary to exchange and to work together. It's impossible to find a solution alone. Huh? And that's true for the countries around, that's true for the continent, and that's true at international level. And the good point is that we will hear about it, you know, expert coming from the three side. So now it's time for me to stop a little bit, and after to let our expert give their feeling. The first expert you will hear now is Mr. Simon Nyambura, which is formerly head of counter-terrorism pillar of the IGAD Security Sector Program. Is now the director of the IGAD Center of Excellence for Preventing and Countering Violence Extremism. So we are deep in our issue. And he is located in Djibouti City, so on the Red Sea. He has a vast experience of all we are speaking now, and have a good view, not only from the area, because he has been graduate as PhD from Kansas State University. So he has a huge look. And so he will explain to you, he will give us his impression. And on this side of Africa, it's clear that Boko Haram have influenced a lot, you know, the situation. And also in this area, you have another group, very important group called Shebab, the Shebab, as you know, in Somalia and all the area, Kenya, Somalia, and so on. So it will be now, it's time to hear our colleague and expert about his view on all these points. So that to you.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, the chair. Thank you for the introduction. Let me start by conveying a special greetings from the IGAD Executive Secretary, Ambassador Mahabub Malim, who would have wished to be here, but due to other pressing issues that relates to the organization, he was not able to be here, but passes his kind regards. He has a special place for Italy. Italy is the chair of the IGAD Partners Forum, and it's a greater supporter of IGAD. So Ambassador Mr. was here. When he was in Addis, he was consistently the chair. Let me also thank the NATO Defense College and the NATO College Foundation for inviting IGAD and myself in particular to be here to share just a few thoughts on the topic before us, Africa in action, tailoring security to real needs and threats. I think the person who chose this topic really thought very well, especially for us who from the African continent, where sometimes we feel like the rest of the world has forgotten us. So when we feel that people are thinking of us and thinking very well of us on how the challenges that we face in the continent can be dealt with, then we really are delighted. So thank you very much, Ambassador, for thinking of Africa. Let me start by saying, when I grew up as a child, my mother had one thing that she used to tell us: when you go to Rome, do as the Romans are doing. So I saw that they spoke from the heart, and therefore they did not bother putting PowerPoint's presentation, and therefore I'll follow suit. Also because I think there was a technical problem that couldn't display my PowerPoint on the screen, but I think that failure was for me to be like a person from Rome and do what the Romans are, speak from the heart. Let me start by saying that the contemporary international system, as we know it, faces a serious challenge and, in fact, a threat of its existence from non-state actors. Today, we sit worried more of non-state actors, be they ISIL, Boko Haram in our continent, Al-Shabaab, than perhaps more we are worried about the interstate conflict that characterized the Cold War era. So my argument here is that while the post-Cold War era ushered in a wave of democratization, it also brought and has consistently brought to us a new security challenge which we are facing from non-state actors. And within this, we are facing both existing threats, evolving threats, and emerging threats. While we have a good understanding of the existing threats, we still have the challenge understanding how these threats are evolving and the new ones that are emerging. What perhaps is troubling is our response to these threats. The response that we have had to the threats that the international system is facing, I would say, have been more reactive than proactive. And I want to give you a simple example. What do I mean by we have been reactive? There is an example I like quoting. When we had the Russian plane brought down by the terrorists in Misri, I don't know how many of you remember what the president of Russia said. If I recall correctly, he said, "The work of forgiving terrorists is the work of God, but the work of sending terrorists to God is my job." And what did we see? We had all the best Russian military equipment, artilleries, headed to Syria. And in that reaction, what experience is showing, and we have seen this especially when you're looking to countries like Somalia, Kenya, that have been had this threat in our region, is that when you have such overreaction, is that most of the time the people you hurt are the innocent civilians. And those innocent civilians, then you lose a portion of innocent civilians who get to join this extremist group. So what we have had in the entire, from when September 11 happened, and we had the popular say, you are either with us or with them. And that meant that we started losing a section of population. Because in the process is that you're not discriminating, is that the moment you hit a place, is that most likely, most of the people you'll hit are the innocent civilians. Even if you don't hit, most of the people who have suffered from all the acts that we have had, most of them are innocent civilians. And therefore, that brings me to the very question of the issues that we are dealing with. And the question that we'd ask ourselves, like, and I go back now to the African continent, and now zero to the Horn specifically. I think the question we'd ask ourselves, Boko Haram has been in existence 16 years ago. Al-Shabaab, 12 years ago. The fundamental question we need to ask, what has changed? How are these groups evolving? And therefore, to respond to this, I want to submit that for you to be able to understand these groups and the way they have evolved, is that you need to analyze it with 3 levels of analysis. And the first level of analysis is the national level, the domestic environment level. And allow me just to keep, these groups in terms of their tactics don't change very much. They are much more similar. So I'll focus more on where I would claim to have a fairly good understanding, and that's in the Horn and looking at Al-Shabaab and its affiliates. Within the national level analysis, Al-Shabaab has demonstrated that it has what you would look as techniques, both in terms of tactical and procedures of operation. And Al-Shabaab has become very adaptive, very pragmatic, and very resilient in terms of its operation. What do I mean? With Al-Shabaab, when it moved from the Islamic court and became the Al-Shabaab, is at first it decided to provide the services that the government was unable to provide. And I think this is what the good senator was mentioning, that these groups have learned how to play the psychological mind to the people, is that they started providing essential services. They started providing security. They provided basic services. The only thing they did not want to provide is education. They know that they cannot provide the right weapon because the education means that you become critical. And therefore, Al-Shabaab also developed a very good structure in terms of its leadership, is that it's very clearly well-structured, almost to, I'm not a military person, but with my limited understanding of the military, and I have to be very careful because I'm in NATO and I'm invited by NATO, so I need to be very careful not to engage where I have limited experience, is that they have very clear, well-structured in terms of they operate like a good military organization with a very well-structured intelligence wing, AMIAD, which is very well organized and able to provide both propaganda war and be able to win that propaganda war. In terms of attacks, is that also it has been, what I mean by it being pragmatic, it has been able to play in terms of the clan, religious dimensions in Somali. And I'm just looking at the national level analysis. And it has been able, depending on which region it is, able to play those kind of tension issues very well. And its attacks has been, when you look at attacks targeting civilians, these have gone to the hotels. And they're very clear when you target the hotels. What you're telling the people is that we are only targeting those who are high-end, who can afford to be in those hotels. And therefore, those people who can afford are affiliated to infidels, whatever they call as infidels. So those are part of the enemies. The rest of you who are not in those places, then you are part of us. The other attack has been targeting security forces within the region and within also Somali inside there, an attack on AMISOM. And their most vivid weapons of attack have been use of IEDs, either personal improvised IEDs or vehicle improvised IEDs. Those have been critical weapons for them to use. And I don't want to get into those details because I know most of you know those ones. Then they have had a good strategy in terms of radicalization. And I don't want to go to that because the good senator mentioned it in terms of playing into those well-known, be they political, be they religious, be they socioeconomic kind of grievances, real or perceived. They are able to exploit them very well and be able to win that. Let me get to the second level of analysis, and that's the regional level. Al-Shabaab has continued to aspire to be a regional and a hegemonic regional terrorist group within our region. It has continued to expand in terms of its recruitment and in terms of its operation to demonstrate that it's a regional terrorist group. And it has demonstrated this by staging major attacks in neighboring countries and even beyond. It did this with the Kampala bombing of 2010. It did this with Westgate, which I must say Westgate was one of the most, I think, highly complex terror attack that Al-Shabaab did, using what the military perhaps would call an infantry group of about 5 well-trained and able to attack very well. Then it went to Garissa University. It did the same. So it has tried several attempts in Ethiopia. It did one. It was able to succeed one in Djibouti. So it has really tried to demonstrate itself as a regional terrorist hegemonic organization. And that brings me into this, the second way it has tried to show itself as a regional organization. Use of language that is mostly used in the region. You're now going to find much of recruitment in the language like Swahili. So they adopt the language where they think that they need to recruit people, and using the propaganda video in that way. And even within its military operation, it has divided itself into 2 kind of military sections. There's what we call Just Yasmin, which targets Kenya, targeting Kenya, Uganda, and all that line. Then it has the Just Yasin, which targets mostly Ethiopia and Djibouti. And therefore it has also, in adopting, has decentralized most of its operation. With AMISOM and its being pressed is that it has also decentralized its operation, and now it has small groups everywhere. You have Al-Hijra, which operates in parts of Kenya, and within every country, I would go citing in trying to show that they have tried to decentralize. At international level of analysis is that Al-Shabaab has projected itself also to be internationally by trying to affiliate itself with the terrorist groups like Al-Qaeda. And therefore, it speaks the language of Al-Qaeda. It pledges loyalty and affiliation to Al-Qaeda. We know now a section of it has affiliated itself to, though a small section, to ISIL. And I think what we are going to wait and see is when we have, or we could make some hypothesis, when the war in Syria, Afghanistan, and Iraq, when it gets so hard, we're expecting that most of these will, especially those who have traveled, will be coming back to the region. And I can tell you, I think it's going to be the next hotbed of terrorist activity, especially if we can't be able to stabilize Somalia. So let me give a few, but what's the way forward? I think first, and I think it was mentioned by earlier speakers, is that we need to clearly come up with good strategies on how to cooperate. Cooperation is critical, and trying to build that cooperation and supporting. It's always, and I'm happy that Italy is a strong member of European Union. It was disheartening for some of us when we heard that the European Union will be scaling down its support to AMISOM. So that means that when Al-Shabaab hears such news, then they are very excited. So we need to rethink in terms of such things that we are doing. But what clearly, and I don't want to bog you, is that we have come as IGAD. We have developed a regional strategy, and I will be giving this to NATO so that they can have it in the library. The others are available on our internet, and this strategy is very comprehensive in terms of the approaches that need to be undertaken so that we are able to deal with a terrorist group. This is a very comprehensive strategy that we developed through a very comprehensive and inclusive consultative process, and has key recommendations of the things that are there. But let me just say 2 things as I get to conclude. One is that the more we face this challenge, the little we know about it. We have not invested in serious research analysis of the problem. We still have very generalized and simplistic explanation. We are easy to say, oh, people are getting to this because they are poor, they are illiterate. These are very simplistic explanations. We need to get into deeper analysis, and I think we need to more empower the researchers from the region, who are from the region, so that they are able to do this research. I joke with people, I tell them, It will be disservice if I landed here in Rome. I have not left the hotel. I think I went just to be in the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, met a few colleagues there, came back to the hotel. Tomorrow I'll take a flight and go back to the region. If I go home and I tell people and I start writing about Rome and how I become an expert of Rome, I think I'll do a lot of disservice. And therefore, we need to empower the people who live in the region, let them do this research critically, let's consume. And that's why we are going to have, I'm saying this because we have not invested in helping both the region governments and their development partners. We have not invested in empowering our researchers within the region to be able to do this research. The next challenge that we need to do, and I think the good senator also hit on it, is that we have a problem of state. The state capacity is very weak. We have vast lands that are ungoverned, and these lands have become where the terrorists are using that land. And therefore, we need to, the next step is where we need to put clear mechanism. And I always say the best way to ensure that those lands are okay is that in most of all the countries, we have vast majority of people who don't even pay taxes, don't even know anything, and therefore they don't belong in that country and they don't feel part. I think we need to, as we do the state building programs, we need to see how many people are brought in to feel to be part of that state. And that means providing them with basic services like education, health, security, and all that. Finally, is that to deal with the issues of overreacting, is that we need to develop a whole of society approach, a whole of government approach in all the strategies we come up with. Is that now this threat we are facing is threatening everyone within both the region internationally, and therefore we are encouraging our governments that they have to change the paradigm shift, the way they have perceived entities like civil society, is that it's a region where civil society and governments are consistently in fight, while they are meant to be working together. Is that we are saying now we want to change that paradigm. We want to see how civil society and government can work together and deal with the threat of extremism and terrorism, because civil society organizations, most of them are on the ground working on the people, and they could support government efforts. I wish to end there. I had a lot to say, but I know the chairman is looking me with an eye to tell me that I need to be stopping. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Just one question. Out of all you have said, very interesting point you mentioned. You didn't spoke about the illicit, the links, possible links between Al-Shabaab, for instance, which is very well organized, Al-Shabaab and illicit trade, the use of illicit trade, and for Boko Haram, for instance. Do you think they have links with illicit trade or not? For Al-Shabaab, for Shabaab, do you think that they use the illicit trade as a financing way? Because you didn't say a word about it.
Yes, I omitted that because UNODC is coming next to me, and I know they deal with this issue, but if you want an answer from me, is that yes, there is a link that Al-Shabaab is using both issues of money laundering, they're using them. That's how they raise funds. They raise funds using illicit, I think there has been some documentation of them selling charcoal to get some money. There have been some evidence showing that they are using illegal sugar industry to be able to gain support. So I would answer, yes, there is that link, but I know UNDC, and we work closely with them, that they would have some good answer to that.
Okay, so that's a good point to make a bridge, to build a bridge with the other speaker. Well, now we'll, as speaker, we'll hear John Kruger. John Kruger is the head of transnational organized crime, illicit trafficking, and terrorism. So you see the link for the United Nations Office of Drugs and Crimes, and he lived in Nairobi, in Kenya. He served before as a regional project coordinator and legal advisor for Southern Africa at the same organization. So we can say he knows very well this part of, I would say, our goals for today. And I have to say that before Dr. Kruger, I have been also a liaison officer in the cabinet of the Minister of South African Minister of Defense. So I think he have a huge overlook about the situation. So what will be interesting is to see, to hear, besides the terrorist risk, what is the extent of the organized crimes and trafficking landscape in sub-Saharan Africa. As I said, so we will follow on with what we have heard from our first expert, and it will be a way to know to go forward on a survey of the situation, and in order to find a way and to contribute to the goal of this convention. Well, Mr. Kruger, up to you. Dr. Kruger.
Chair, thank you very much. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much. First, our appreciation for the organizers, the NATO Defense College and NATO Foundation, for inviting UNODC to participate. It is our pleasure to be part of this discussion, very relevant, very timely, and we hope to contribute to a lively discussion today and tomorrow on this topic. I'm going to be utilizing a couple of slides, 4 or 5, to illustrate a few points. The presentation will be available, so I have no means to go into detail into the whole presentation. With regard to UNODC, I have to say right at the outset that my presentation will be focused on UNODC's mandate. It will be focused on East Africa, and it will be focused on the criminal justice environment, not the whole topic of security across Africa. So if you do see a narrow focus, it's intentionally done so. With regard to East Africa and the drivers that we see in context of organized crime and terrorism, there's nothing new. And you'll recognize a number of the key drivers: lack of rule of law, corruption, ineffective governance, ideology, socioeconomic issues, lack of opportunity. The only reason why I'm showing this is to illustrate the point that regardless of the criminal justice or the rule of law, crime prevention strategy, or national security strategy, or military strategy that may be followed, unless you address all of these drivers one way or the other, and that is certainly not UNODC's mandate, but unless you address all of these drivers, you're only treating symptoms. If you're only going after a terrorist organization, you're only going after organized crime syndicate, and you don't deal with the underlying drivers, you're merely addressing symptoms, and you're going to continue seeing the problems in one way or the other, in new causes or the other. Now, with regard to persistent threats in the region, I'm first going to deal a little bit with transnational organized crime, then not going to go into detail with regard to terrorism, as Simon has done that quite comprehensively, but then follow on with regard to the nexus between the two. In East Africa currently, we see a number of transnational organized crime activity occurring. Again, not new to the region, but developing in an ebb and flow, sometimes higher in the one extent, sometimes lower. Maritime piracy was a good example, eradicated to a large extent, and then all of a sudden re-emerging and surging to a certain extent over the last couple of months. Same with smuggling of migrants, which is currently a key concern to the European Union as part of the Khartoum process. The movement of people in and out of the region, I have to say immediately with the caveat that considering all of the drivers that I've mentioned initially, there's a reason why people move. However, there's also then the opportunity for syndicates who move people to benefit through criminality of the misery of people who want to move for all those particular reasons. What is important to mention, however, that if we look at the spectrum of organized crime activity in East Africa, before I get to terrorism, is that none of these crimes happen in isolation. Again, it's not unique to East Africa, but it's very pertinent in East Africa. We see a number of converging crimes when it relates to syndicates operating a human trafficking ring, whether it's the same syndicate moving opiates in and out of the region, moving arms and ammunition out of the region, and then, of course, the golden thread that runs through all of that is illicit financial flows, whether money laundering, whether cash couriers, money moving in and out of the region, whether for profit or for ideology, moving to the side of terrorism. So that's the second point I want to make, is that we cannot develop any kind of program or any kind of countermeasure that purely focuses on trafficking in persons or maritime crime or illegal fishing within the maritime context, or drug trafficking, small arms trafficking. There's very clear links between these criminal activity in the region, and very clear links between the syndicates, and often the same syndicates that operate across these spectrums, making money as the bottom line. The one particularly interesting point that we do see in the region, based on information, fairly real-time information to our disposal, is that the syndicates involved in smuggling of migrants quite often don't do anything else. They don't move drugs, they don't move small arms or ammunition, they move people. They specialize in moving people in and out of the region. And I'll get to that point later on, but that includes foreign terrorist fighters that comes into the Horn of Africa. Any other syndicate, of course, when we deal with opiates coming out of the Makram coast, out of Afghanistan, if we deal with small arms and ammunition coming into the region, dual-use technology, whether blasting caps or commercial explosives, quite often we see a conflation of the same syndicates being involved in all of those crimes. So the second point, we have to look at this holistically, pragmatically, as how it happened in reality, as opposed to the academic approach of only dealing with corruption or only dealing with trafficking in persons or any of the other related crimes. Now, moving closer to the discussion that I'm aiming to focus on, is what happens when we have the underlying factor of money, ideology, and unfortunately, again, not unique to East Africa, but certainly a driver in East Africa, corruption merging. You end up with a very dangerous situation. You end up with a situation where, for some or the other reason, money is no longer the driver, but money fuels the ultimate objective of ideology. You see Al-Shabaab, and I'll go into some detail now in that regard, utilizing the same modus operandi as syndicates would, not to profit, but to fund themselves and to achieve the objective of that particular organization. Now, again, as I said, that's not unique to East Africa. There's ample evidence and research being done, both on the open source side, but also in classified intelligence that clearly indicate that this is not a unique situation to East Africa. We've seen that with Al-Qaeda in the past. We've seen it as far back as the 70s with some of the syndicates and terrorist organizations in Europe who benefited from illegal trade in one way or the other. Now, just a quick mention of the theory and practice of convergence. And here I want to say immediately that the evidence that we have in East Africa does not show any new trend in itself. There's no new, huge emerging trend of a link between terrorism and organized crime per se. What we do see is a variety of conflation, a variety of interaction, and a variety of behavior in the region that would have the one interact with the other or behave like the other. It is important to state that, because quite often one would see research, and especially when it relates to fundraising, the notion to consider an emerging trend, especially in East Africa, that is a big threat. That is simply not the case. We don't have evidence to that extent. It is a threat, and it's an emerging threat to a certain extent in many guises, but it's not the next big threat and next big trend that we've seen in the region. What we do see, and this is based on research we've done between 2016 and 2017, unpublished UNODC research, very tactical research on field operations around the Horn of Africa in particular, is that we see coexistence, cooperation, and convergence, in particular in relation to Al-Shabaab. And I'll speak a bit about Al-Shabaab now. Al-Shabaab, to a certain extent, behaves like a syndicate in one way or the other. They certainly cooperate with other syndicates, and I'll go into the detail now about that. And there's certain convergence between groups moving contraband into the region that will work with Al-Shabaab. And this is clear from the research and the evidence that we've seen and done in the region, that this certainly happens, whether at an ad hoc basis, but it does occur. It's, as I said as a caveat, no new trend, but it certainly does occur. A number of indicators that we've seen out of the research of the last 2 years, research in East Africa, indicates the behavior of Al-Shabaab in particular ways. Now, the first point, illicit taxes in relation to charcoal and sugar, is well documented. It's part of the United Nations Security Council Somalia-Eritrea monitoring group's reports. It's downloadable from the UN websites. It's well documented that Al-Shabaab, in many instances, has allowed passage or trade in charcoal or sugar import-export against Security Council resolution to fund themselves. And Some instances they would trade themselves, in some instances they would allow others to trade, and they would tax that trade or safe passage, same as which most gangsters or syndicates would do, almost as a form of protection money. We see a number of illegal import and exports into the region, purely from a business point of view, number of front companies, number of legitimate business people, unfortunately also trading with some shady characters and organizations in the region, purely for the sake of money. But that money and that contraband, quite often, if in the case of commercial explosives and blasting caps and related dual-use technology, ends up in the hands of the wrong people, in many instances, Al-Shabaab. If we look at the modus operandi of Al-Shabaab, without going into technical detail now, but if we look at the construction of vehicle-borne IEDs and IEDs and explosives, including small arms, hand grenades, and ammunition related to, it is equipment and contraband that gets into the region, apart from that, what is taken from AMISOM, unfortunately, in many cases, but the region through commercial trade. Some of the latest explosions we've seen in Kenya, allegedly conducted by Al-Shabaab, clearly was due to the use of commercial explosives and not military-grade explosives. Same with small arms and ammunition. Interesting fact that we've picked up in the region as part of research is that small arms, AK-47, Kalashnikov, and other small arms are in abundance in the region. It's not difficult to get hold of those. What is difficult to get hold of, and where we do see an increasing trade in the region, is in ammunition. 7.62 rounds and particular ammunition being utilized in the region is coming into East Africa through various channels, which I don't want to discuss in detail at this point. But ammunition coming into the region is an emerging threat that we do have to look at very, very carefully. It's a continuous fuel for destabilization in the Great Lakes area, including DRC. It's a destabilization factor for the Horn of Africa, including Somalia. The movement of ammunition into East Africa is a point that I do want to flag as a concern to be carefully watched. In particular, not mentioning cybercrime as one of the threats for the region at the moment, purely because we don't see that as an emerging priority at this point. What we do see is online radicalization and cyber-enabled crime. So often operations would be conducted and executed through the means of cell phone and mobile and other technology. We see intelligence collection and communication and a variety of logistics activities happening, but we do not see cybercrime in its true sense of the word, identity theft, cryptocurrency, blockchain, and others as the immediate threat for East Africa, or being utilized by syndicates and groups at this point. Latest UNODC World Drug Report indicates a minute 0.005% of drug trade happening on the dark web or deep web, and we don't see that as an emerging threat in East Africa at this point. Cyber-enabled crime, however, is a certain concern, and the ability of governments to track digital evidence, to collect digital evidence, to be able to analyze it and utilize it as not only intelligence data, but also as evidence in court, would be critical. Trafficking in persons is another emerging trend that we've seen in the region in relation to Al-Shabaab. Unlike Boko Haram, Al-Shabaab does not seem to be recruiting people or forcefully taking people for the sake of radicalizing them as child soldiers or soldiers in particular. We do see them take women and children for domestic servitude. So they would take people to care for them, to cook for them, to marry them, worse as it is, but we don't see the same trend that we see with Boko Haram in the Sahel, where it is about radicalization and operationalization of these individuals. Smuggling of migrant routes, and a point that I have to reiterate very carefully, movement of people, migration in itself has nothing to do with terrorism, and I have to reiterate that point. What we do, however, see, and I have to flag that as well, is that foreign terrorist fighters moving in and out of the Near East, moving in and out of the Horn of Africa, moving in and out of Europe, do utilize the same smuggling routes as migrants would. And unfortunately, that is a point that we do have to consider very carefully, whether it's through vetting, whether it's through security clearances or other security operations. But those routes are being utilized by people that's not just moving for the sake of economic prospect or any other reason. Foreign terrorist fighters are certainly detected on those routes. Final couple of points that I'm not going to go into detail now, but one of the emerging concerns that we do see, and a number of questions we often get, is in relation to opiate trade, heroin coming out of Afghanistan into the Horn of Africa and the region. We have no evidence to show that Al-Shabaab is trading in heroin or trading in opiates. However, a working hypothesis is that if they do allow safe passage for charcoal and sugar against taxation, that they quite often would and quite likely would also allow safe passage of heroin coming into the region, entering through the Somali coast to the rest of East Africa. And in that regard, they certainly quite likely indirectly benefit from the drug trade, same as the Taliban out of Afghanistan, a matter that we need to consider. In fact, just as a sideline comment, opiate trade and the movement of heroin into East Africa, whether through the maritime routes or the land routes, is one of the greatest threats to islands and the Horn of Africa. It means an integrated cross-cutting approach, so we don't just look at terrorism or organized crime or justice or rule of law or corruption. We look at programming that address all of these as it would look like in real life. Deal with the criminal activity from a pragmatic point of view and do so through the regional organizations, IGAD and others, work very closely with the AU, the three other regional organizations, East Africa Community, Great Lakes, the International Conference for the Great Lakes, and the Indian Ocean Commission, together with IAPCO, the chiefs of police, and certainly all other key stakeholders in the region. I'm going to end with the last slide, which is put in this slide as a number of objectives, but essentially those are the conclusions where we've identified weaknesses from a strategic point of view that requires intervention. The first, and I think Simon referred to that already, is that we just don't understand the threat when it comes to the conversions, the links, the nexus between terrorism and organized crime in the region. There's a whole lot of anecdotal reporting, there's a whole lot of speculation, there's a whole lot of quick fix comments and remarks on this. We need proper empirical analysis and research from a number of points of view, from an academic point of view, from a comprehensive threat analysis and threat assessment point of view, and certainly from a national security intelligence point of view to better understand what we're trying to counter. Secondly, and critical within the region, we have to promote adherence, ratification, and/or accession to the international legal frameworks. Both on the counterterrorism side, the 19 conventions and protocols, the various Security Council resolutions, and certainly the United Nations Convention Against Transnational Organized Crime and its protocols. 5 to 6 out of the 13 countries that we work in still haven't ratified most of those conventions. Without the legal framework, it's difficult to talk of a rule of law, human rights-based criminal justice response. The legal framework is critical, and promoting adherence to that framework is critical. Strengthening specific capacities. And that is a message to donors, it's a message to the UN system, including UNODC and other partners. It doesn't help to deal with pragmatic problems by addressing it academically. We have to strengthen the operational capacity of member states to solve real problems, whether it's through setting up specialized units, equipping those units, providing them with hardware and software and skill and knowledge and mentoring, but to deal with a problem from a real-life pragmatic point of view. Funding, programming has to be geared towards operational capacity building. National coordination, and it sounds like a simple notion, and considering that even in the best of best countries where you have strong national coordination, national security mechanisms, national coordination still doesn't happen. In most countries, we find that various security agencies, various law enforcement agencies do not speak to each other, never mind cooperating. If we do not fix national coordination within member states, international cooperation is impossible. If you do not have national security, military, law enforcement agencies, crime intelligence, prosecution, and all the related agencies speak to each other and strategize together and plan together, operational implementation is impossible. And finally, international cooperation. What we deal with here is transnational in nature, whether it's the money moving in and out of the region, whether it's the contraband moving in and out of the region. In our experience, what I've addressed now normally involves 3+ jurisdictions. If you do not have the ability through a legal framework and a proper formal and informal cooperation mechanism, whether through central authorities, Interpol, and other mechanisms, to actually share intelligence, to act on that timely and in an effective manner, and then to follow through, whether through intelligence operations or through effective prosecution, we are again dealing with symptoms as opposed to trying to solve the real problem. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Dr. Kruger, just one point, one question after all you said, which are crossing, what we said before, so it's very interesting to see that everybody is going on the same way. Do you think that on this cooperation you spoke about, in between all the countries in Africa and mainly in the, I would say, the English-speaking
part of Africa. Do you think that the laws are the same, more or less, and so it's possible to use the same kind of law to fight against terrorism, illicit trade, and so on? Or do you think that there is a lot to do today in order to achieve this goal, which is an important goal also, obviously?
In principle, and again, I reflect now on the 13 countries that we work in East Africa, it's about 50-50, where we have ratification and accession to the international instruments and have them incorporated effectively into national legislation. Now, the emphasis is on, because quite often you have legislation on organized crime or legislation on money laundering or legislation on counterterrorism, but the definitions do not match, and that's the problem. The moment you don't have harmonization of laws across region or continents or internationally, formal cooperation becomes difficult, if not impossible. You can't affect extradition, you can't affect mutual legal assistance, you can't confiscate proceeds of crime unless you have common criminality, unless there's definitions that match. So there's very good progress, but there's a lot of work to be done still to ensure that the harmonization of laws allow for effective international cooperation, at least on the formal side. Informally, it's something else, and you can work beyond those definitions if it's informal cooperation. But to follow through with prosecution and the formal mechanisms, it becomes difficult.
Okay, thank you. So we will switch in French a little bit in order to move on. Okay. Donc maintenant, je vais passer la parole au docteur Jihan Ben Yahya, qui est la coordinatrice régionale d'un observatoire du crime organisé pour l'Afrique du Nord, qui est basée à Tunis. Elle travaille à l'ENACT. L'ENACT, c'est la société qui est une association qui fait une organisation qui travaille sur le développement d'une réponse africaine au crime organisé transnational. Donc on est au cœur de nos problèmes. Avant ça, elle était à l'ONU sur les parties crimes et drogue, et auxquels s'ajoutaient les problèmes de corruption et économique. Donc on est toujours dans la même zone. Elle faisait ça pour l'Afrique et pour le Moyen-Orient. Donc elle a une très bonne connaissance de toutes ces zones. Et ce qui est intéressant, c'est qu'on vient d'avoir deux speakers qui sont du côté plutôt est de l'Afrique, et là on va avoir quelqu'un qui est de l'autre côté, où les problèmes sont, on va le voir, très proches, mais pas exactement les mêmes. Et alors je passe sur tout ce qu'elle a pu faire. Elle a fait beaucoup de choses. Moi j'ai retenu dans son CV, c'est qu'elle a fait aussi, elle a créé une organisation non gouvernementale pour l'engagement des jeunes, pour développer l'engagement des jeunes, qui s'appelle Jeunes Indépendants Démocrates. Donc ça c'est qu'elle entraîne actuellement, elle forme des jeunes leaders tunisiens justement pour apprendre et faire face à tous les problèmes qu'il faut pour gérer un pays et puis gérer les problématiques qui sont les nôtres. Alors aujourd'hui, le docteur Ben Yahya va nous parler des liens entre les groupes terroristes et les familles du crime organisé. Donc là, oui, on aura vraiment couvert l'ensemble du spectre de ce qu'on était chargé. Et elle va parler bien sûr de l'Afrique du Nord, puisque c'est dans cette zone qu'elle connaît bien, et d'autant plus que dans cette zone, on connaît depuis longtemps, dans les pays du Maghreb, on travaille beaucoup sur les liens entre le crime organisé, les grandes familles du crime organisé, les partenaires, et bien sûr maintenant, on a aussi bien entendu le terrorisme. Alors voilà, donc je vais donc passer la parole maintenant au docteur Ben Yahya pour continuer ce tour d'horizon pour le fond de notre session. Docteur, c'est à vous.
Merci. Merci, Monsieur Juillet. Je me permets d'abord de remercier le Collège de défense de l'OTAN pour son invitation et pour l'organisation de cet événement. Je voulais juste rectifier une toute petite chose s'agissant du programme ENACT. En fait, c'est un programme qui est mis en œuvre par un consortium de 3 organisations que sont l'Institut des études de sécurité, Institute for Security Studies, basé à Pretoria en Afrique du Sud, Interpol et le Global Initiative Against Transnational Organized Crime, basé à Genève. Voilà, c'était juste une petite précision. Voilà. Oui, c'est important. Voilà, merci. Donc je sais pas, ouais, c'est bon. Alors, pour ma présentation aujourd'hui, je vais essayer tout d'abord d'essayer de reprendre quelques concepts. En tant que représentante d'un institut de recherche, pour moi, il est important aussi de définir avant de pouvoir parler un peu plus en détail de certains aspects. Tout d'abord, je vais parler rapidement de ce que c'est finalement la criminalité transnationale organisée. Ensuite, je vais essayer de vous présenter notre approche de la criminalité transnationale organisée à travers l'angle, cette fois-ci, du développement et non pas uniquement de l'approche traditionnelle, sécuritaire. J'essaierai aussi de vous présenter rapidement quelle est notre réponse face à cela, quel est notre programme et quels sont nos outils de travail. Et enfin, je vais en tout cas essayer d'aborder quelques pistes par rapport à ce fameux nexus ou lien qui existe ou existerait entre des groupes terroristes et des groupes liés à la criminalité organisée, sachant que l'un appartient à une plus grande catégorie. Donc voilà. Est-ce que ça marche? Oui. D'accord. Donc, comme vous le savez, la criminalité transnationale organisée, elle a été consacrée à travers l'instrument juridique international qu'est la Convention des Nations Unies contre la criminalité transnationale organisée et ses protocoles additionnels. Néanmoins, cette convention, bien qu'elle soit très importante, puisqu'elle a permis finalement d'engager une très grande partie de la communauté internationale vers un certain nombre d'objectifs globaux. Néanmoins, la définition, il n'existe pas de définition de la criminalité transnationale organisée. Alors ça a été certainement volontaire, étant donné que en fait c'est une notion qui peut regrouper beaucoup de choses. Donc peut-être pour éviter de manquer certains éléments, on a préféré ne pas le définir. Néanmoins, dans la Convention, on a défini ce qu'était la notion de groupe criminel organisé, ce qui nous permet de pouvoir en tout cas avoir une définition des acteurs impliqués dans ce phénomène. Nous avons, avant de vous expliquer davantage en quoi consiste notre travail, nous avons opté pour une définition par typologie de crime. Donc nous avons repris un certain, en fonction de la littérature qui existait sur la question, repris à peu près une douzaine donc de crimes qui apparaissent comme étant aujourd'hui notamment Afrique comme étant des menaces prioritaires. Donc comme vous voyez, il y en a beaucoup. Donc ça passe de certains aspects connus tels que le trafic de migrants, la traite de personnes, le trafic de drogue également, mais aussi par ce qu'on appelle également les crimes environnementaux, qui sont notamment très présents en Afrique australe et en Afrique de l'Est et qui aujourd'hui font davantage l'objet de recherches et de publications. Et évidemment d'autres comme les flux financiers illicites qui sont finalement quelque part qui est finalement un type de crime qui est transversal à tous les autres crimes, puisque sans argent, ces groupes organisés ne peuvent pas opérer. Et d'autres comme qui sont des menaces un peu plus récentes, comme par exemple la cybercriminalité, qui est aussi finalement aujourd'hui de plus en plus utilisée par tous les différents groupes organisés pour parvenir à leur fin. Donc aujourd'hui, ce que j'essayais je vais essayer donc de vous parler aujourd'hui, c'est le lien qui finalement existe entre la criminalité transnationale organisée et le développement. Pourquoi parler de ce lien? Parce que en fait, pendant très longtemps, la question de la criminalité organisée, transnationale organisée, était perçue comme à travers l'angle traditionnel sécuritaire, à travers le contrôle des frontières, avec la nécessité de renforcer les capacités des forces de sécurité, etc., qui est quelque chose d'essentiel. Toutefois, on s'est rendu compte aussi que la criminalité transnationale organisée n'impactait pas uniquement la sécurité au sens strict des États, mais qu'elle favorisait, ou du moins qu'elle défavorisait, le développement des États. Donc aujourd'hui, depuis quelques années en tout cas, on a eu un certain nombre de rapports et de littérature, qu'il s'agisse des Nations Unies ou d'autres organismes gouvernementaux ou non gouvernementaux, qui ont fait état donc d'un certain nombre de corrélations entre, par exemple, la hausse du taux de criminalité organisée en Afrique, ainsi que les difficultés qui peuvent être rencontrées en matière de développement. Également, quand on parle de développement ici, on peut parler du développement à plusieurs niveaux, c'est-à-dire qu'il s'agit aussi bien du développement global au niveau des chiffres qu'on peut avoir, les indicateurs de développement humain à l'échelle d'un pays, ou bien des choses un peu plus locales ou même mezzo par rapport aux communautés et aux sociétés. Donc, et on se rend compte donc aujourd'hui que ce n'est plus uniquement une approche qui pourrait être traitée par les acteurs traditionnels de la sécurité, mais que finalement, tous les acteurs aujourd'hui ont intérêt à prendre en compte ça dans la manière d'approcher certaines problématiques, notamment pour essayer d'avoir une approche, comme disait tout à l'heure Madame Bencheda, beaucoup plus multidisciplinaire et beaucoup plus transversale, et qui est aujourd'hui nécessaire, puisque comme on l'a vu et comme l'ont très bien expliqué mes co-speakers, le fait que finalement tous ces groupes aussi s'alimentent entre eux. Pardon. Voilà. Donc aujourd'hui, ce qu'on peut dire de manière plus précise, c'est que finalement, la question de la sécurité n'est pas donc juste une question d'instabilité au niveau des frontières ou de porosité des frontières. Aujourd'hui, la question de la criminalité organisée, de la criminalité transnationale organisée, c'est avant tout un phénomène qui alimente la corruption, qui alimente les conflits, qui va infiltrer directement l'économie. Pourquoi? Puisqu'il s'agit aussi, par exemple, pour le cas pour la contrebande, en tout cas pour la contrebande de biens licites, de toute une frange de l'économie qui est passée sous silence et qui ne permet pas du coup de savoir quelles sont ces richesses créées et ou de comment se répartissent ces richesses. Elles génèrent également des violences, on le sait très bien, que ce soit au niveau des communautés locales, que ce soit pour le partage de certaines richesses, que ce soit pour la stabilité au niveau des communautés qui vivent au niveau des frontières, dans lesquelles souvent il y a évidemment une recrudescence de la criminalité, comme son nom l'indique, transnationale organisée. Et effectivement, donc, comme ce qu'a dit mon collègue tout à l'heure, finalement, aujourd'hui, la criminalité organisée, elle détourne les ressources qui pourraient être consacrées au développement, à la réduction de la pauvreté ou encore à l'amélioration des services de base. Et c'est pour ça que finalement, on se retrouve avec ces groupes-là qui essayent qui essayent non pas par bonté d'âme, mais pour peut-être gagner un peu plus d'adhésion au sein des communautés, mais qui finalement vont proposer ces services-là à la place des États. Donc, juste un petit rappel, puisqu'on est dans un cadre aussi international, que donc aujourd'hui, la question de la criminalité organisée, transnationale organisée, a été consacrée au niveau des objectifs de développement durable, les SDGs. Aujourd'hui, ça concerne donc finalement tous les acteurs, qu'il s'agisse des acteurs onusiens ou des acteurs internationaux engagés dans le développement au sens large. Comme vous le voyez ici, l'objectif 16.4 des objectifs de développement durable indique la nécessité d'ici à 2030 de réduire les flux financiers illicites, le trafic d'armes et de renforcer les activités de récupération et de restitution des biens volés. On parle ici de tout ce qui est recouvrement des avoirs, asset recovery et tout ça, et de lutter contre toutes les formes de criminalité organisée. Donc ici, c'est pas juste, c'est pas juste des mots, on va dire, en l'air, mais c'est véritablement un cadre dans lequel les organisations essayent de s'inscrire pour avoir toujours finalement un objectif en vue. Aujourd'hui, comme je vous l'ai dit, donc la question ne touche plus uniquement l'aspect sécuritaire au sens strict, mais finalement dans d'autres aussi objectifs de développement durable, on retrouve la question de la criminalité transnationale organisée. Par exemple, dans ce qui concerne l'objectif 15 relatif à l'amélioration de la vie terrestre, on y parle de la question de la surpêche, de la pêche illicite, de la pêche non déclarée, qui aujourd'hui impacte énormément les communautés, mais aussi l'environnement. Et c'est pour ça, ce que je vous disais tout à l'heure, aujourd'hui, on parle aussi de la criminalité environnementale dans la criminalité organisée. Il y a également, comme dans l'objectif... excusez-moi, dans l'objectif 4, tout ce qui concerne l'esclavage moderne, le travail forcé, tout ça qui est évidemment mis en œuvre et organisé par des groupes liés à la criminalité organisée, le braconnage des espèces végétales, le braconnage des espèces animales, enfin voilà, tout ça pour vous dire qu'aujourd'hui, la question, si on veut en tout cas essayer de répondre à la question de la criminalité organisée, il est vraiment important de le prendre à travers une approche globale, holistique, qui prenne en compte les différentes nécessités dont on a parlé, et aussi de ne pas le voir uniquement à travers un angle, une réponse sécuritaire. Je pense que c'est vraiment très important de souligner ça. Je sais que je me répète, mais voilà, je sais que c'est quelque chose aujourd'hui qu'on essaye véritablement de mettre en avant, puisque on se rend compte et on s'est rendu compte que finalement les réponses uniquement sécuritaires n'ont pas permis d'aboutir aux objectifs escomptés. Donc, et c'est là où j'en arrive donc à la présentation de du programme ENACT. Donc, ENACT est un programme, comme je l'ai dit, qui est implémenté par 3 organisations. L'Institut des études de sécurité que je représente, Interpol, que vous connaissez bien sûr, et le Global Initiative Against Organized Crime, basé à Genève. Donc, pourquoi un consortium de 3 organisations ? Parce que, en fait, on s'est rendu compte que, en plus de l'approche multisectorielle et holistique de la question de la criminalité organisée, il était important aussi d'avoir une approche multidisciplinaire. Aujourd'hui, Interpol travaille sur ces questions avec les agents les law enforcement, donc les agents comment on dit en français ? Oui, les agents d'application de la loi, voilà, excusez-moi. GI est beaucoup plus est un réseau, en fait, je dirais, d'experts sur la question de la criminalité organisée, mais qui offre en fait une approche très globale, très stratégique, très pointue de la question de la criminalité organisée. Et en fait, nous, à l'Institut des études de sécurité, on essaye un peu de faire le lien entre l'académique, je dirais, et l'opérationnel, en essayant aussi peut-être de vulgariser la question de la criminalité organisée, qui souvent est quand même assez complexe. Mais au-delà de la vulgarisation, c'est aussi d'apporter aussi des réponses concrètes, pratiques aux policy makers, donc aux personnes qui travaillent sur les programmes étatiques, etc. Et d'essayer du coup ce programme essaye donc d'avoir à la fois une approche multidisciplinaire, mais aussi multisectorielle. Donc je pense que aujourd'hui c'est quelque chose qui est assez unique en Afrique, puisque en plus, et je vous l'expliquerai un peu plus tard dans nos activités, nous sommes présents sur tout le continent africain. Donc aujourd'hui, ENACT, quel est l'objectif global d'ENACT? Donc ce qu'on cherche, c'est donc d'atténuer finalement l'impact de la criminalité transnationale organisée sur les développements, et aussi sur les aspects finalement liés à la gouvernance, à l'état de droit et donc à la sécurité. Encore une fois, ça montre en quoi toutes ces notions sont intimement liées. Comment est-ce qu'on compte y arriver? notre objectif ici, c'est d'être un apport en termes d'analyse, en termes de suggestions, afin de guider l'élaboration de politiques publiques et d'améliorer la coopération au niveau régional et continental. Et là, je reprends ce qu'a dit Madame Bencheida et mon collègue Monsieur Nyamboura sur la nécessité de renforcer la coopération. Nous, ici aussi, ce qu'on veut essayer de mettre en valeur, c'est la coopération sud-sud, la coopération intra-régionale, intra-africaine, puisqu'il y a beaucoup de choses à apprendre aussi, bien sûr, d'ailleurs, mais aussi entre nous, entre Africains. C'est quelque chose de très important. Il y a des expériences dans certains pays qui ont réussi et certainement que notre proximité régionale, culturelle, favoriserait beaucoup l'échange et nous, c'est quelque chose à laquelle on tient énormément. Évidemment, toutes ces recherches et tout ce dispositif que je vous expliquerai juste après, l'objectif est avant tout aussi de renforcer les compétences des acteurs locaux. Et quand je dis les acteurs locaux, c'est aussi bien les acteurs gouvernementaux que non gouvernementaux. Aujourd'hui, il y a une urgence, je dirais, à renforcer les capacités aussi des chercheurs en Afrique, puisque finalement, ils sont sur le terrain, ils sont là, ils comprennent vraiment tous les enjeux. Et je pense que c'est très important aussi pour nous de dire que nous sommes aussi une organisation avec des compétences africaines et qu'on cherche aussi à renforcer les compétences de nos autres collègues africains. Comment donc... ouais, d'accord, j'avance vite. Donc rapidement sur notre dispositif, mais je vous laisserai regarder sur notre site enactafrica.org. Grosso modo, nous, on travaille à travers 5 observatoires régionaux qui sont basés en Afrique du Nord, en Afrique